Hi, this is Robert Clintonbeard with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. We're going to take 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing content from accomplished leaders and business owners to provide you with some value to help you scale your business, become a better leader, and push yourself out of your comfort zone into something which is going to stretch you. We really hope you enjoy these shows, and we really encourage you to like and share with your friends and network, which is only going to help us get a wider audience and improve our industry. I'm super excited to announce that in 2023, we're going to be announcing new partnerships, digital courses, some rebranding, and your opportunity to be coached by one of our many industry leaders, experts, or coaches. Cheers, everyone. Hi, this is Robert Clintonbeard with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. I'm really excited to be joined today by one of the partners of Bruce Wilson and Company, Tito Caceres. Tito, thank you for joining me this morning. Really excited for you to be here.
Thanks, Rob.
So, tell me a little bit about your background, how you got into the industry. Just love to hear people's stories and how they got to where they are right now.
Yeah. So more or less grew up in a family business, and more or less just learn a little bit about the industry that way. Eventually, I got into the industry working for a larger contractor, started in the field, moved myself up, eventually got out of the industry and got an opportunity with a recruiting firm, learned the recruiting space. And then more or less it segued into continuing to support the green industry through recruiting.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, if I've used recruiters in the past, definitely been a big help. I know there's some stigma around recruiters, which we'll jump into today. But I know it's been a brutal few years with COVID, with trying to find people. I don't know how many millions of people seem to have left the labor force, and then you hear all these stories about people that are trying to move from a W-2 position into buying a business as well. So there's just so much movement going around, recruitment, and trying to find the right people. So maybe at that higher level, just talk to me through about the whole recruitment process.
Yeah. And specifically the recruitment process and how you're seeing it right now. Help me understand. So
I think there's I suppose how many hours are spent looking for that role, and I'll actually pull up even one of the slides you sent across to me just to see if that is helpful.
Yeah.
See that? Okay.
Yep. And so, currently, recruiting is one of the things that it's absolutely necessary. I think the green industry is one of the industries that we see. It's a huge need still. And from a recruiter's perspective, there's a lot that goes into it that maybe most people don't see. You could see here some numbers, in terms of the hours spent just sourcing for one role in a week. This is just these are pretty much average numbers, if you will. 13 hours spent just sourcing for one role. 60% of the job seekers quit long or complex job applications. These are things for in terms of contractors to keep in mind. And then we see this a lot, and every time I talk to contractors and clients throughout the country, everyone is more often fraught with finding or filling their entry level positions. Well, they're also the toughest to fill as well. So currently it's very difficult. I don't know if you could pull up one of the slides that talks about the participation rate, if you will. The participation rate is one of those metrics that more or less talks about the people that are applying. That was it right there. If you could go back to that one. No, that one. Go back to one more. Yeah, this one here. So I'll start with the unemployment rate. Pretty low right now across the board, and this is the U.S., right? The picture for the U.S. But if you think about in the green industry specifically, that's even lower, right? Because most people are gainfully employed, and that's why it's so tough to fill these roles. And honestly, it's one of the challenges for a lot of companies to either grow amongst so many other things, right? But I think one of the numbers that kind of is very, and this has gone up just quite a bit. It's just up a tad. It's still historically low. The 62% labor participation rate. What that means is these are the amount of people that are participating to or applying to positions. You know, it was before the pandemic, and it was like just a drastic drop off. Before the pandemic, that number was above 70%. Now it's back. This is more or less as low as it was probably in the 60s and 70s. Quite
Wow.
alarming.
Yeah.
And I say that, and I think this is a very important number for people to think about because, you know, it was before the pandemic. You could say that you could post a job on one of the job boards, and you had applicants. You know, were managing that. You were managing your pile of resumes, if you will, or applicants. That's not the case as much anymore. Now we're seeing that because of this drop off, what we're finding is that, and there's some numbers. I think LinkedIn came out with a number. It says that 70% of the more or less the people that you're gonna find that are interested in an opportunity are gainfully employed. And what that means is that you're gonna find more people. You're gonna have to find people that are gainfully employed to more or less pull them versus waiting on someone to apply. That's going to be the right talent for your open requisition, if you will.
No, and that's interesting as well because I'm assuming that the participation rate or even just the stigma around the landscape industry doesn't help us because, I think traditionally it's been looked at as, dirty business, beat up trucks. Why would I want my son or family member to be part of a landscape company? Because, there's some stigma around it. But, we all know that we're now dealing with technology, with robotics, we're dealing with all the data, with all the software systems. There's all this technology coming into it. There's all these professional companies out there that really makes it an attractive place. I mean, who would not want to spend a part of their time in the office and a part of the time out in the field enjoying, the nice landscaping?
For sure. No, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we like to advise anyone that we work with is, be mindful and cognizant of your branding. It all plays a part. And to your point, now you have less of an opportunity to even wait on talent to come knocking down on your door. Something to be mindful of as well.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's one of those. If there's a slide here I'd really want to show, which is the first one, and talks about what does it currently look like right now. I believe it's the first one, Rob. It talks about average. Keep going, that one there.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, on average, it's taken companies 30 to 36 days to hire. I mean, that is an average, and quite honestly, that's just if you compile all of the positions across the board around the country. It's still a good number to think about on average, right? So it's not like you could just think about, I like to think about this because a lot of contractors, I know I've talked to some people, and that's if I get on a sales call, for recruiting needs is what specifically, it's, hey, can you find me someone yesterday? And
Of course.
oftentimes we don't really exactly we don't realize that it takes time. This process takes time to fill seats, and so just being a little bit more proactive versus reactive is something to think about. I think this is a very important number. And this is, I don't think, especially with and we will dive into a little bit about some of the things you made mention about how the perspective of recruiters in the industry. But some of the best candidates are off the market quicker than we realize. It's on average they're actually off the market under 10 days. And so if contractors or we're waiting on people to just keep coming through the door, and sometimes we'll lose out on good talent, and something to think about there as well. 74%, and this is actually a lot of the blue collar industries, if you will, is kind of compiled in here, are struggling to find talent. I mean, 3/4 of a lot of the industries related to the green industry, we're all struggling, right? So it's not just our industry, it's more or less across the board. This is something to be thinking about. Again, going back to that, in terms of are we being proactive or reactive with our recruiting strategies? And some of the larger companies are struggling even more, which is surprising. And I've actually seen that in talking to some of the contractors around the country. Some of those smaller companies are, if they've got a good strong culture, they're pretty much fully staffed. Some of the larger companies, you still are struggling to find people, fill seats and things like that. So I say that because it's not easy right now. And so when you're thinking about one of the resources that you could potentially be utilizing, specifically in the green industry, is are you diversifying your approach, because of all these things that we're mentioning? This is not just our industry, this is across the board. The US, it's everyone is struggling to find people right now.
No, that's so true. And working with all the clients I do, I hear that story all the time. And one of the messages I've been preaching for it feels like the last 2 or 3 years is you have to throw the old recruitment process book out the window, the way you used to do it in the past. You now need to be reinvent yourself and look at different ways of recruiting people, because you're right, the labor force has shrunk. It's just putting an ad in, or maybe leveraging your network is not necessarily working as much. So using tools like a recruiter, like creative ads, using all the different social media, and even one of the things I've experienced myself is that perhaps you put the onus on to HR manager to be that person trying to find a candidate. Now, there's not a great deal of I suppose pressure on them, probably the wrong word, but they're the ones not feeling the pain compared to the operations people in the field if they're short a few people. So is there as much urgency on their part, or are they just dealing with their normal day-to-day HR issues, which they feel as though are more important? So, and then, I almost feel as though you almost have to be somewhat of a salesperson, because you're having to respond quickly to people, you're having to react, you're having to sell them on the company when you have conversations with people. So definitely a completely different game these days trying to recruit people. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that if I could tell anyone, why you would utilize an external recruiter, or, someone that has somewhat of a specialized skill set, you're 100% right. Recruiting is a sales role. It's absolutely that. And sometimes when you have one person, say a hiring manager or an HR person, they're also managing a lot. They have a lot on their plate. And the appropriate way is actually, asking the appropriate questions, selling them on the opportunity. But if we're going 100 miles an hour and we're being reactive because we got to fill a seat today or yesterday, unfortunately, sometimes that could cost to, not filling a seat on time, and more or less sometimes maybe just filling a seat with someone that may not be the right fit. And that's probably the case here, to your point, right? It's you may have someone that's just has too much on their plate and they just can't do the right thing, or maybe have the time to vet candidates appropriately to fill the right seat with the right person, or to fill the seat with the right person, more or less. So yeah. I would 100% would agree with that.
Yeah, I've even heard, to really back up your point, I've even heard of recruiters bringing people to the table, and then something happens to the owner or the person in charge, whether they've gone on vacation or something else has come up, and then they're not responding to the top 1 or 3 candidates, and suddenly 2 or 3 weeks later they wonder why all these candidates have disappeared. Or perhaps if the candidate is swaying whether they join the company, if they've got this big delay, they're thinking, well, this is truly the company I want to join, if they seem so disorganized. So I think there's a lot of things that the companies can do to just improve how they handle things.
100%. One of the things that I rarely ever hear is talking about the candidate experience. And there's something to be said about that, because as either a contractor or even a recruiter, internal or external, I'm going to speak specifically to our industry, and every niche, every industry, every vertical is very small in and of itself. It doesn't matter how big the industry; it's all connected, right? It's all an ecosystem, and sometimes just not providing the appropriate feedback in a timely manner, we can potentially lose out on a good candidates. Maybe that's not the right fit for your organization, but because we didn't give them feedback in time, now they may not recommend your company to their friend that could be a potential fit for you. And again, to your point, yeah, I've seen this happen all the time. I was, kind of why I mentioned this number about, if you're not moving fast enough, you're going to lose on top talent. Top talent's off the market. If they're actively looking, or if you can engage them, they're off the market in 10 days, because everyone wants them, right? They're highly qualified and skilled and talented. So absolutely, I put a lot of emphasis in that regard in terms of the candidate experience, and people need to be mindful of that. It's just provide timely feedback. Also, if you're going to one of the things that's probably I've seen, and this is from a recruiter's perspective, but I say this externally and internally, I've heard this is a very challenging thing. Yeah, it's timely interview scheduling. Absolutely, this is one of the things that, like, where you can make so what I've seen a lot of times is we're presenting to your, you said a quick story there, a little quick case study, but I can't tell you the amount of times where we're presenting candidates to hiring managers, and we're waiting a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to hear back. Or they'll say, hey, we want to talk to this person. Let me see if I can rile up everyone that's going to meet with this person. And that takes another week. And now this person went to talk to someone else that has a much more streamlined hiring process. And now they're able to hire them before we're even able to potentially schedule a first or second interview. So I think this is a great slide that you brought up. The only edge you really have right now in all of this is time. That is your competitive edge. Again, being proactive is something that, especially in the green industry, we talk about all the time, right? With your clients being, that's probably the easiest ways to sell new work is, hey, who is proactive and who's reactive, and who's communicating accordingly. But really, this applies as well with recruiting, in that sense as well. If you're gonna engage candidates, or if you see a candidate, one of two things that you can do, whether you're gonna pass or you want to talk to them, but let them know immediately. The quicker, it's no different than us. We're the same way. We all want that feedback, and it's totally okay. We all know that sometimes rejection is part of all of this as well. Whether we're a candidate or whether I've seen as well where I had one yesterday. A client presented an offer to a candidate and they rejected it. Goes both ways, but ultimately, timely communication, timely feedback is going to create a better candidate experience, which ultimately plays into your reputation, which plays into your branding, which plays into how people think of when they're talking to their colleagues or peers. Hey, look, I talked to ABC, landscaping, and immediately they told me I wasn't a good fit, but it was a great experience. And you know what? I recommended a good buddy of mine that probably is a better fit. So there's something to be said about that. And I think that that's something that I think most people don't realize. It can make or break in a lot of ways your recruiting process, if you will, or that function.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And let's jump into the other thing we touched on at the beginning about just the reputation of the industry, or recruiters, I should say. I'm going to pull up a slide here, which I think you wanted to cover as well. And just, I think it related to, the cost of vacancy as well, but talk about, just the timing, and then go on to address some of the concerns that people have with hiring recruiters. Because, immediately when you hear recruiter, you think, oh, it's going to cost me a ton of money. There's a certain stigma about them.
Absolutely.
So you probably hear it all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, when you think about, so absolutely, I'm going to just start with that. There is a stigma about recruiters and the costs of a recruiter. Hey, it's too expensive. Okay, well, expensive relative to what though? When you think of, and we could dive into this, cost of vacancy is a great metric for people to think about. And I'll dive into this first. What it is essentially, what is it costing you to have a position unfilled? And here's a quick way to calculate it. So you take your annual revenue divided by your number of employees. Then you take that average employee revenue divided by your working days. Then you get your daily average employee revenue. Then you take that daily average employee revenue, you multiply that times the average days to hire. So here's a quick example, a very common role, account manager. Let's say a $20 million company. On average, let's take the US average, right, of 36 days to fill a position, and you got 150 employees in your company. So you divide that 20 million by 150 employees, you got $133,000 as your average employee revenue. Obviously, these are gross numbers, but more or less to kind of give people an idea. If you divide it by the working days, it's costing you $510. For a $20 million company, it's costing them potentially $510 in revenue daily. And if you multiply that times the number of days on average that it's going to take to fill that role, let's say 36 days, that's $18,000 could be your cost of vacancy. So if you talk to a recruiter, this is just a month of having a position unfilled. Let's call it an account manager, more or less, right? If you're talking to a recruiter, if you're looking at an external resource or even internal, if you want to go and choose, say, hey, I'm gonna hire an internal recruiter, you could use this to think about what it's really costing you potentially. And if you take that, let's just say, on up for us, we've seen some positions take 120 days. What is that costing them at that point, right? This is just your US average. It's even more. So what's it costing you to use an external recruiter, an internal recruiter, whatever you choose to do? That's could be a fraction of this cost. And this is for one position. What if you have multiple of these roles? So I thought it was a really good metric. It's not really talked about enough. And I think most contractors should be thinking about in terms of when you're looking at who you don't have or what position that you have open, what's it potentially costing you, right? On top of opportunity costs as well. And then what is it doing for the rest of the team as well, right? If you've got an open role, and then you're putting on weight, more responsibilities to some of these other positions as well, some of these other some of the colleagues as well, or some of the other people, right? Because now you're not, which could potentially lead to burnout to them, which could potentially now you have more positions open because now they're leaving the organization because we're not filling the other roles in time.
Yeah, no, this is a great slide, and as you say, it's rarely talked about, but you're right. There's the unintended consequences of putting that extra burden on existing employees. You start getting stressed, maybe people start taking time off. But the other thing you haven't touched on is what's it doing to your clients? If you've got clients who are seeing a turnover of, say, account managers, or they're just not getting serviced enough in terms of just the communication, then is it putting those contracts in danger? And again, there's huge consequences there. Again, just that cost of changing contractors or losing contracts. So yeah, this is just scraping the surface of what the potential cost is. for companies. So I think this is a great slide to kick things off. What are the other things that maybe come up when you get that resistance to bringing a recruiter on?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Look, I mean, I've heard some comments like this, reputation of, well, you're poaching our people for external recruiters, right? Utilizing external recruiters. Hey, you're poaching our people. And look, I mean, I know in the landscape industry, we work really hard. I say that because I come from the industry, so I think like if I'm still in it, we work really hard to find our talent. But at the same time, the recruiting industry or those recruiters or external recruiters specifically, they're just putting out bait. It's no, and it's more or less up to any company to take care of their people and build strong cultures to retain your people. The bait is always going to be out there. And if someone is unhappy, they're going to find a way to leave regardless. Just because we reach out to people that are gainfully employed or people that are applying that are gainfully employed doesn't mean that's the right opportunity for them. There's a lot of different stories. We've had a lot of situations where we're relocating people amongst several things, but there's that stigma of the poaching people is one of the things that it's really unfortunate to hear, because it's nothing to do with that service. It's more to do with what are we doing as a contractor, as a company, to keep our people, because if they're not happy, whether a recruiter reaches out to them or not, they're going to leave. And not to mention, I think the one thing as well, and I think about the recruiting industry as a whole, I think this is a good number to think about, is it's a $650 billion industry as of this year. There's a reason it is, right? It's because it's a service that a lot of companies around the globe are using. And for as a landscape contractor, I think that we think in tangible. We're working with materials, we're working with equipment, we're working with a lot of tangible things that we can see, and recruiting services is not a very tangible. It's a professional service, and so I think sometimes we can overlook what goes behind the scenes in terms of this process, and what everything that goes into recruiting. And ultimately, recruiting is one of the services that takes a big risk, most of the risk up front, in hopes to find the right fit for someone, and the unknown variable, which is humans. So very, very challenging to say the least, but it's just something that I think we hear often, and slowly but surely that mindset is shifting, and I'm seeing a lot of contractors, even from outside of the industry, that are used to using recruiters, that are promoting the use of them, because they're invaluable to a lot of these organizations and how they grow.
Right. Yeah, and I think to touch on that, and I'm touching on it because I've heard a few examples of this, where when you talk about tangible, intangible, some recruiters, I don't feel, do themselves any favors, because they don't necessarily have the proactive communication, where there's just deadly silence, because there's maybe no candidates come up, but the contractor doesn't necessarily know all the, they've been through 100 or 200 different types of candidates and rejected them for one reason or another. They don't necessarily have that information. But I mean, I think if I'm correct, recruiters are now using some pretty powerful software tools, so that information is there. I think just sometimes there's a disconnect between sharing that information of all they've gone through with the client, just to sort of connect the dots. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And that is up to like the better firms that I'm aware of. It goes with, I'm going to say this, I'm going to preface it by saying customer service is customer service, whatever, and anywhere you are, in whatever industry you're in, right? So proactive communication and shedding light in terms of what you're doing and you're not doing, or the challenges, that is customer service 101, right? But I say that because there are also tools that we can utilize to also keep everyone abreast as to what's going on. And I think that's extremely important as well. And I think that's something that as you're a contractor looking to work with a recruiter, hopefully that they have certain tools in place where what's going on, the activity that's going on a weekly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, whatever that communication touch point is, because there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes. But if you don't know, then what value do you think that they're bringing to the table, more or less? So at least for us, I want to speak for us. That's something that we try to send a weekly report. And also in certain instances provide access to a client portal to see, for people can see more or less who's in that and what's going on, and just have open lines of communication. It's extremely important.
Yeah, that's cool. So we're running out of time here, Tito, but just tell the audience about, your company, what you do, how people can get hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. At Bloom Partners Talent Solutions, our niche primarily is the green industry, and some parallel verticals as well that we work with. Some of us are from the industry, which is one of the reasons why we bring a lot of value in terms of streamlining the process and hopefully filling slots and requisitions in a timely manner, but with people that are thoroughly vetted and are screened from someone that comes from the industry. There's value in that. More or less, other than that, though, pretty standard in terms of how we operate and the tools that we utilize. We work with positions from skilled labor up to executive level roles, and our range is from, we're covering from as far out west as Hawaii, as far north as even Vermont and New York City. So we're nationwide, and we've got a very good team, very proud of, and we're here to help for anyone that's more or less looking for that range of positions.
Cool. Tito, been a pleasure talking today. Thank you for your time. Always good to see you.
Likewise, Rob.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Tito.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hopefully that was pure, dead brilliant for you today, and you got some great takeaways for your business or your leadership role. This is Robert Clinkenbeard, and we'd love to get you and your friends to join us in our future journey. So please subscribe through the various podcast channels, or visit thecommerciallandscaper.com or brucewilsoncompany.com and check out some more information there. Anyway, hopefully you all have a pure, dead, brilliant day. Cheers, everyone.